안녕하세요. I'm sorry, that is the only Korean that I know. Thank you for being here today at the Visual Studio 2012 launch. And thank you for investing in yourselves to learn more about what we have in store for you today. As was mentioned, I am a principal technical evangelist for Visual Studio. I work in Redmond, Washington, in the United States. It's just outside of Seattle. If you're ever in the neighborhood, let me know and I will buy you lunch. I'm serious. I do tell that to a lot of people. Nobody has ever asked me to take them up on it, but I will buy you lunch. I have worked on Visual Studio for approximately 10 years at Microsoft. I spent about a year working on the X&A team over in Xbox, but most of my career has been spent working on different versions of Visual Studio. I'm also on Channel 9. If you don't already use Channel 9, it is a fantastic resource. We have sessions that are recorded at conferences around the world that you can download and access for free on a wide range of Microsoft technologies. Really a lot of content on there. I also maintain a blog, and all of my demos are available as a virtual machine that you can download and follow along with as hands-on labs and demo scripts. So I would encourage you after today to go download that, become more familiar with the features in Visual Studio 2012. I've written a couple of books, so new versions available for 2012. Now this is my first time in South Korea. I am extremely excited and honored to be here. And as an American, there are a lot of things that we hear about South Korea, and I'm finding out for the first time this week which of those things are true and maybe are not so true. The first thing we learn is that the people are just very friendly and warm and honorable, and I have to say that is absolutely true. Everybody I have met has been very courteous and smiling, and it's really a great time to be here. I also love your food. I am probably going to gain 10 pounds this week. It's all very, very good. And of course, it's such a beautiful city. It's so clean. Now, there's one other thing, however, that a lot of Americans have heard about South Korea, and unfortunately, I don't think it's true. We hear that a lot of people go around pretending to ride horses. I haven't seen anybody yet. It's only Tuesday, so maybe later on in the week. Actually, he is very famous in the United States. I have a friend this weekend who is having a Gangnam-style birthday party. I don't know what you do at a Gangnam-style birthday party, but he's having one. So, let's talk about Visual Studio 2012. I've never been more excited to be a Microsoft employee in my 10 years at the company. If you take a look at the wide range of technologies that are coming out just this year, it's mind-blowing. Windows 8, Windows Phone 8, Windows Server, and of course, Visual Studio. Now, these are all great operating systems and platforms like Windows Azure, but let's be honest, they would be nothing if not for the great applications that you will go build on top of them. And that's why Steve Ballmer gets so excited and says, developers, developers, developers. Really, without you, our company would be nothing. And so thank you again for betting on Microsoft and using our technologies. Now, if you take a look at the types of applications that are being built today versus even a few years ago, we're seeing a lot of recent trends in the way that consumers and business users are expecting applications to evolve. We expect applications to go with us, to be mobile. I love my Samsung Windows Phone. I also carry with me a tablet and a laptop, and I have computers at home, and I expect to be able to access my data around the world wherever I go. I expect applications to be personal and to remember me and to remember my preferences and bring in my social networks from Facebook and Twitter and Yammer. And this is really important. And these are the things that our customers and the people who use our software expect. And so Visual Studio needs to give you the tools to help you build these applications. The other trend that we notice is that customers expect that the applications will continue to get better over time. We've seen this in application stores for Windows Phone, for the iPhone, for Android. Applications are constantly updating. And this is a great world where we can make small changes to an application and quickly deploy them and get our feedback from customers and incorporate that back into what we deliver moving forward. It's never been a better time. So really today there are two things that I want you to remember about Visual Studio 2012. I'm going to refer back to this a couple of times today. Number one is that it gives you the tools you need to build these modern applications. Some of my colleagues today will be presenting some great sessions on Windows Azure and on Windows 8 and how you can build these modern applications. And a little bit later, I'm going to be showing you how Visual Studio 2012 can help you manage the entire application lifecycle, from idea through development to operations. These are just a few of the types of applications that you can build with Visual Studio 2012. Of course, we give you tools to build Windows applications. It wouldn't be Visual Studio if we didn't. But we also give you tools to build those back-end services that you can consume from any device, whether that's on the Microsoft platform or a third-party platform. And of course, we want to help you scale your apps up and down as appropriate, whether that's in an on-premises data center running Windows Server or in the cloud on the Windows Azure platform. And so if we break this down and take a look at some of the technologies that make this possible, of course, we're all familiar with the client application stack, whether you're building for tablets or laptops, or you're building web-based applications with HTML5, CSS3, JavaScript. These are extremely popular technologies, and of course, we at Microsoft recognize that you also probably need to start building for other types of device platforms as well, such as Apple and Android. And to make that possible, Microsoft is a big supporter of these standards. Web APIs such as REST and OData. Microsoft participates in these standard bodies, and we make sure that our platform, that our tools are going to help embrace these technologies. Of course, we also need to think about how we manage these applications as well, whether they're running on-premises or in the cloud. And so we partner closely with our friends in System Center, which can help you manage those applications. We're just getting started here. This is an area known as DevOps. Let's help the developers work more efficiently with operations. And I'll be talking more about that moving forward. As you look later this year, we also have new releases coming out from the System Center team that are going to allow you to integrate data directly from scenarios like System Center Operations Manager and Team Foundation Server. We want to find issues that are happening in production and surface those to developers so that they can quickly fix them. Okay? So, let's talk about the application lifecycle for a few minutes. This is what I'm most passionate about. 15 years ago, when Visual Studio was first released in 1997, it was really meant to help individual developers write better code. Did anybody use Visual Studio in 1997? Very first? Great. Fantastic. So you remember that it was always been new versions introducing ways to help you build better code and to test that code and increase quality. But applications are rarely built by individuals anymore. Applications are built by teams. And if you look at teams, teams consist not only of programmers and testers, but also business analysts and stakeholders and operations. And we need to be able to give you tools that allow you to manage the application throughout that entire process. Every time we introduce a new person within that process, it's an opportunity for you to have communications problems. And so we believe that we can give you tooling to help you solve that. We also are seeing a trend where development teams need to focus on being continuous in everything they do. I talked about how we're trying to give you continuous value delivery and constantly updating your applications with new versions. In order to do that, you need to be constantly listening to your customers. You need to be in a mode of continuous feedback. And there's some challenges with that I'll talk about momentarily that we have new tooling to assist you with as you start to get that feedback back into your development team. We also can't afford to think of quality as a one-time thing. In the past, quality used to be taking a build and handing it to testers and finding out whether or not you had any bugs. But now we need to be continuously testing your applications, continuously fixing those bugs, continuously finding bugs maybe that are in a production environment and fixing those as well. And finally, we need to focus on continuous delivery. We need to move out of the world where we take software applications and package them up once every 2 to 3 months, or even for a company the size of Microsoft, every 2 to 3 years. Instead, we need to move into a model where we're shipping once every month, or even every week sometimes. And if we can increase our shipping cadence, this means we can more rapidly respond to feedback, and we can more rapidly respond to problems with quality. And so if we look at the application lifecycle, it really consists of these 3 phases: defining the application, developing the application, and operating the application. And all of these weave back together in this virtuous cycle. Now, what are some of the specific problems that we want to solve during this life cycle? Well, let's focus on each area individually. If we start with defining an application, one of the problems that we say at Microsoft is, how often have you built what your customers asked for, but not really what they wanted? Now think about that for a minute. Software is complicated. It's getting more and more complicated all the time. And in order for us to effectively communicate between stakeholders and programmers, we need to have a deep conversation. There's data that says that if you make a change to your application after you've already started to develop it, it's 10 times more expensive to make that change in development than it is to make the change with your customer on paper or on a whiteboard. And so we really want to help give you tools to help you define those requirements up front before you start writing code. The other problem that we want to help you with is managing these conflicting priorities. There's always going to be more work than we have time to do. And there are a lot of development technologies and methodologies that have come out over the last 10 years that give us processes to help us balance those priorities. How many people practice Scrum today? Or some form of agile methodologies? Okay, so a few hands going up. There is a really great methodology out there that exists for helping us solve these problems. But the problem is that a lot of those methodologies assume that everybody is going to be in the same room together. And even if you're in the same room as a programming team, oftentimes your stakeholders might be located in different locations. And stakeholders are a critical part of being able to shape the priorities and get that feedback back into what the development team is building. So, let me show you some demonstrations. The first thing I'm showing you here is a PowerPoint storyboarding tool. So this is just PowerPoint, and we've turned PowerPoint into a storyboarding tool that can allow you to quickly build what you think your customers are asking for. And then I can show this to my customer. I can email it to them. I can put it up on a screen and have a conversation with them in a conference room. And I can get their feedback. Does this meet your requirements? Is this what you want me to go spend 2 months building? And if the answer is no, let's make a change to it. Let's make sure that what you want me to build is exactly what I think you want me to build. And so, for example, I can create a new layout here, and I can use any of these rich shapes over here. So we give you shapes for Windows applications, web applications, phone applications. In fact, down here, you'll see I can click to the Visual Studio Gallery and access more shapes that have been contributed by the community. And in fact, last week, Microsoft shipped shapes for iOS, and eventually we'll have Android shapes as well. So regardless of the type of application you're building for, we'll give you a tool that helps you quickly iterate and build those storyboards. I can search, for example, for a button. I can take the time to make this look exactly like I want. And then if I wanted to save this shape, I could save it to a shapes library. So I can add it to my shapes, and then I could share it with other people on my team. Another thing I can do is maybe start with an existing application. So here's an existing application, and I just want to pull in some existing design assets. And now very quickly, I've created a storyboard that I can share with my customer. Now let's assume that we decided what we wanted to build. Now we need to schedule the work. Now we need to line up a team of programmers to actually go make this feature happen. And so this is our new web access front end for Team Foundation Server 2012. Notice that I have my team listed here. So even though I might have 1,000 people using my Team Foundation Server, each individual team can have their own homepage. I have my build that I care about, a lot of my bugs, my requirements. Now if I want to add new work, I can just come to the product backlog and add that work. As an employee, as an admin, I want to edit employees. And now that created a new requirement. It's stored in Team Foundation Server. And I can also turn on what are called forecast lines. And with forecast lines, I can have a conversation with my customer about when specific requirements will be delivered by the development team. We might also decide to reorganize this list. So for example, I can drag this, and now it shows how that is updated. I can also show what it looks like if I add more people to the team. Maybe I get more money, and we add more people to the development team, and now I can have that conversation with the customer. We can even expose this view directly to the customer so they can see when the features they're asking for will be ready. Now I want to schedule this work for the current iteration. So I'll just drag and drop it, and I'll break this work down. I need to design this feature. And of course, I need to develop this feature. I'm very creative today. Now, of course, when I did that, my team is now overcommitted. It's telling me right away, I don't have enough developers to make this plan work. And so I can easily take some of this work and just reschedule it for a future iteration. And now my team is happy again. This information is coming from the Capacities tab. You can see here that I've defined how many hours each person works on my team. I can also define whether or not people have holidays that they're taking, or if they get sick. That can be represented here. And I can come back to this plan every day if I need to make adjustments to make sure that we're delivering exactly what our customers expect us to. And then once I'm happy with this plan, I can switch over to my task board. And so this is my modern day implementation of Post-it notes on a whiteboard. And so as my team members start to finish their work, we can just drag it to in progress. I can tap on this and update the number of hours I've earned. If this was a touch screen, then I could just touch the touch screen and drag the work over. Notice I have a burn down chart. So this tells me how much work is left before the end of the iteration. And if I drag this work over, it's now updated in real time. So those are just a few of the ways that we can help you on the definition of what your team is building before you get to the expensive part, which is programming. Now, let's talk about programming. There are, of course, a lot of ways that Visual Studio 2012 continues to make programmers more productive in this release. One of the problems that we see is that developers are constantly being interrupted. Whether you need to go to lunch, or maybe your manager asks you to work on a high priority bug, these are all interruptions. And as developers, it's very difficult to move from one task to the other. You might be in the middle of editing some files, or setting up breakpoints, and so on. And so to get back in the zone is really difficult. And so there are several ways that I'll show you that we respect the way that developers can be focused on a problem, and we want to help them move back and forth as required. Another thing that we want to bake into the tools is quality. We want to really make sure that you're focused on quality throughout the entire application lifecycle. And I'll show you a few ways that we do that. I'm curious, how many people have tried Visual Studio 2012? A few of you. Oh, that's great. That's great. So this is Visual Studio 2012, and what you'll see here is that I'm in the middle of doing some work. I have some files open, I have some breakpoints set, I've made some edits to some files, and let's assume that my manager comes to me and says, I need you to work on something else right away. Well, in the past, I would have lost a lot of work. I can save those files, the edits that I made, but trying to set up all those breakpoints and which windows I had open is going to cost me a lot of time. And so notice over here that we have this new area called My Work. And with My Work, I can quickly see exactly what work's currently assigned to me. And I also have the option of suspending work. And when I suspend work, it's going to take my changes, it's going to save them on Team Foundation server, it's going to clean up my environment, and then it's going to give me the option of resuming this work. So I go home for the day, maybe I do some other work tomorrow, and then tomorrow afternoon I come back and I click on resume. It's automatically going to rehydrate all those files I had open, the breakpoints, the tool windows. If I had multiple monitors, it would remember where the position of my debugging windows were, and it's going to help me get right back into the zone. Extremely powerful. Another thing that I really like is the Solution Explorer. The Solution Explorer has a lot of really nice features in here to help you be more productive. One of the things that I recently discovered, actually, is I can put on what's called a pending changes filter or an open files filter. When I do that, it's now going to scope Solution Explorer so that it shows just the files that have changes. It's just really nice things like that to help you be more productive. Another thing that we allow you to do now is edit files that are under source control outside of Visual Studio. If you've ever tried to do this, it's really difficult in previous releases. You have to check out the files or tell Team Foundation server that you're working offline. It's not a great experience. But now, we handle this for you with what are called local workspaces. With local workspaces, I can just come into a file, make changes to it, create a new file, and Visual Studio tracks in the background exactly which changes I made. So now when I come to pending changes, it sees that I made changes to this file, and that I added a new file, which I can include as part of what I'm checking in. This is especially nice if you use graphical editing programs like Photoshop, so that you don't have to constantly jump back and forth between version control and those third-party tools. I'm going to make another change here that I want a colleague of mine to take a look at. I've been working on this regular expression for a while, and I'm not very good at regular expressions. I think I got this right, but I would really like to have somebody else on my team take a look at this. And think about that for a minute. If you do code reviews today, most people we find that do code reviews use one of three different methods. They either wait until they have a team meeting and they review code on a board like this, which is not a great use of everybody's time, or they send email asking somebody to take a look at their changes, or they go to their office and they interrupt them and they say, "Excuse me, can you please take a look at my changes?" We thought that there could be a better way here. And so what we've done is we've integrated code review directly into Visual Studio. Now I can say request code review. I can provide the name of the person on my team that I want to take a look at this. I can say, does this regex look right? And I could submit this request. Now, when my friend Cameron logs into Visual Studio, he's using the dark theme in Visual Studio. Then if he goes to my work, he will see that he has this request from me to perform a code review. He can see that I've asked him about this regular expression. If he clicks on the file, you'll notice that we finally improved the diffing tool within Visual Studio 2012. So it's really easy for him to see what changed between the old version and the new version. He can provide a comment. This looks pretty good. He can also leave a comment directly on a line. So consider renaming this to postal code. The United States is the only country that calls postal code zip code. And so we would like to use what the rest of the world does and call it postal code. I don't know why this is beeping. There we go. I'll file a bug on that later. So at this point, he can send these changes, and he can say, this looks pretty good. Another thing, though, that I want to point out is notice that there's this new type of tab in Visual Studio 2012. Usually, tabs are on the left side of the development environment, but this particular tab is on the right side. This is what's called a provisional tab, or a temporary tab. I'm sure that you've been in the middle of a debugging session, and you press F5, you press F10, F12, F10, F12, and so on. Pretty soon, you have 20 different tabs open, and you have to go buy a new widescreen monitor just to use Visual Studio. I'm sure I'm not the only one that's been there, right? Provisional tabs help you with this problem by only opening files temporarily. So when you're in the middle of a debugging session, or when you're in the middle of a code review like this one, we'll keep the file open, but then when you finish that code review, or you finish that debugging session, by default, we will close those tabs for you and give you your development environment back. Now, if I wanted to, I could click on this button here to promote that to a permanent tab so that it stays open. But in this case, Cameron's going to be done with this file, and so he'll say, this looks good. It's going to finish the code review, and the file's gone. Just one more way that we're helping you be more productive as you move from one task to another within Visual Studio 2012. So now I'm back to my development environment. If I come back to my work, I see that this code review is finished. I can see the comment that came from Cameron, and I can decide that I'm finished with this review and I'm completing it. Another really great advantage about having code reviews be part of Visual Studio and part of Team Foundation Server is that I can ask questions later on. I can say, for this piece of code that we're getting ready to push to a production environment and give to a customer, did we have a senior developer look at that code? And by having that built into Team Foundation Server, I can ask those questions. Whereas in the past, if I had those conversations in the developer's office or even over email, it's difficult to understand whether or not we signed off on those changes. Now, let's talk a little bit more about code quality. Visual Studio 2005 first introduced support for unit testing, and it provided a built-in unit testing framework called the Visual Studio Unit Testing Framework. And it's a pretty good unit testing framework, but there are some others that the community has built that we really like as well. XUnit, InUnit. There's unit testing frameworks for testing JavaScript code. And there's so much great innovation happening in the unit testing space that we did not want to force you to choose one unit testing framework over another. So instead, for the first time ever, Microsoft is shipping Visual Studio unit testing for both C# and C++ code and Visual Basic code, but we also give you the option of adding third-party testing adapters as well. And what that means is when I built my solution, it looked across my entire solution for any unit tests that it knows how to build. I can run all of those unit tests from one location. I can run those unit tests on my build server if I want to. And then I can see all of the results in one location. Notice that this particular test is an X unit test. And then I believe this test is a Visual Studio unit test. And so that means that if you find an open source solution that already ships with unit tests in it, you don't have to choose about whether or not you convert those tests to be in one specific format. You can now use everything. Another way that we're improving quality for you is with a technology from Microsoft Research that we've been working on for several years called code clone analysis. Code clone analysis helps me look across my entire solution for any pieces of code that look like they're similar to one another. Now, why is that important? Well, as your solutions grow over time, you need to identify opportunities that you can make your code more maintainable by refactoring common blocks of code into smaller blocks. And so if I click on Analyze and analyze this solution for code clones, it will tell me that it found 2 matches here. And if I compare these 2 files, you'll notice that they're very similar, but what probably happened is a developer copied from one project and pasted into another project and changed one line. Now, they could have changed more than one line, and code clone analysis is smart enough to find that. And so this is a great example where I might want to refactor these 2 blocks of code into one common block of code. Another nice feature that I'll show you here is that currently it's difficult for me to understand where in my solution these files live. And so if you come back to Solution Explorer, there's a button up here called Sync. And so if I highlight this file and click on Sync, it's now going to show me that this particular file is part of the fabricamfiber.web project. If I look at the other file and do the same thing, click on Sync, it now tells me it's part of extranet.web. Another nice little feature to help you be more productive. Now, let's assume that I just built what I think my customer asked me to build. I've spent a few weeks building it, but I really want to get their feedback about whether or not what I built meets their expectations. Now think about how you answer that problem today. If you're lucky, the users for your application might work down the hallway from you. You can walk to their office, you can ask them to use the application you built, and you can watch them, and you can take notes, and you can take that back to the development team. But most of us are probably not that lucky. Most of us are probably building software for people that might be located around the world in different time zones. And so that is a challenge for you to be able to build software and get the feedback from those customers that you need to make sure that you're meeting their expectations. And so Microsoft has built a new tool that you can use to start asking those questions, capturing that feedback, and making sure that you respond within your development team. To start, I'm going to click on Request Feedback. I'm going to ask one of my stakeholders to give me feedback about the application that I built. I'm going to tell them where that application is, maybe log in as test user. And then I'm just going to ask them questions about what do they think about this particular application. I can say, does the employee page provide the right functionality? Click on employees. And I can add more feedback here if I want to, and I can keep going. And then once I'm done, I click on preview, and that's going to generate an email message for my stakeholder. When I move to the other machine, you'll notice I have this email that I received, and I have this link that says start your feedback session. When I click that link, it's going to open what's called the feedback client. The feedback client is a really important tool for being able to capture the feedback in an actionable way that your customer has about your application. The other nice thing about this is that it costs nothing. You can send this to 10,000 users if you want to. They can all install it, and they don't even need to have a license for Team Foundation Server in order to work with it. Once they have the application open, they can click on Next, and they have several options for how they file their feedback. You can turn on a video recording along with audio annotations. So if you're sending this to the vice president of your division and they're very busy, they don't have time to take notes, they can at least turn on audio recordings and they can speak to the feedback client so that you can inform the development team about what you need to be changed. So I'll just say, I love the new UI. I know that they're asking for feedback on the employees page, so I'll click on that. And now I'll take a screenshot because what I really want is I want a new column here. I noticed that I need to get employee ID. And so I'll just draw a little box. I'll ask them to add the employee ID column, and then I'll submit that. That automatically went to Team Foundation Server. I didn't have to send an email. I didn't have to paste into another application. It's now stored as part of Team Foundation Server so that when my development team, notice we have 2 pieces of feedback right now. When I refresh this, I now have 3 pieces of feedback, and I can open this up, and I can see exactly what my customer was telling me. I can create a new bug, I can create a new requirement, and I can link that feedback directly to that bug or directly to the requirement. And that way, when the developer starts to work on that, they'll understand exactly what the stakeholder was asking them to do in their own words. So there's no communication, translation problems that happen. The other nice thing about this is that a lot of customers I talk to, a lot of development teams, have a policy that says before you take an application from development to production, you need to make sure that you have maybe 5 people that are stakeholders sign off on the application and say, this is ready, this meets our requirements. So again, by having everything stored within Team Foundation Server, I can ask those questions. I can send this directly to any auditors that need to know whether or not I met those requirements. So, we've talked about ways to help developers be more productive. We've talked about ways to make sure that you have that conversation with stakeholders. We've talked about ways to help make sure your applications have a high quality bar. Now, our job isn't done. We've built an application. We've handed it off to the customer. They're going to start running it in production. Now, there's a lot of challenges that take place in the operations part of the application that as developers, we still care about. One of those challenges is how do you get your application from development into a production environment? In the past, we might have deployed once per year, or maybe twice per year if we were really fast. More and more, we need to make sure that we're deploying on a very rapid scale, sometimes every week. And to do that, Team Foundation Server has a tool called Lab Management that's built into it. Excuse me. Lab Management allows you to work with the operations team to define a repeatable process for going from development straight into production. And so you can make a change to your code, and oftentimes you can have that change running in either a test or a staging or a production environment in a matter of minutes. And we have tools to help you automate that entire workflow. Very soon, back in Seattle, I'm going to be publishing a case study about how the Xbox team does this. The Xbox team is using Team Foundation Server so that if they make a change, maybe to the way that gamer score or achievements or leaderboards work, they can take that change, they can build it, and they can have that running in a test environment within minutes. They can run all of their automated tests in that environment. And then they can have their manual testers start using their Xboxes to play with the service and make sure that everything's working correctly. And that's a process that a year ago would have taken a long, long time for you to make a change. You might have had to get many people involved to take that change and make it available in a real environment that you can test with. And of course, we know that there's going to be problems that you find in production. We can test forever and still not be guaranteed that the applications we're testing in production won't have any problems. Now that's to be expected, but the problem is when you get a phone call at 3 a.m. on a Saturday night and someone says, your application is having this bug, how do you diagnose that problem? We can't just install Visual Studio in a production environment and attach a debugger and expect to be able to step through the code to see exactly what happened. And so instead, what we've done is we've taken some of the tools that you're used to from Visual Studio, and we've made those available for you to use in a production environment. I'll show you just a quick demonstration of that. This is my production website. You'll notice that most of the time it works okay, but then sometimes we have this error that happens. And so my customers called support and they said, we have this error and we're not sure what's going on. Now at this point, as a developer, it can be very difficult for me to understand what's happening on that production machine. But what we've done is we've made a tool called IntelliTrace that we shipped in Visual Studio 2010 available so that you can run this in a production environment. It's a free tool. You can download it, you can run it on the production server, and you can collect information about exactly what's happening in that production environment. And what we do is we store a trace that says exactly what happened every time an exception was thrown, every time we accessed a file system or a database or the registry. All of this information can be captured and then stored as part of an IntelliTrace file. So I can now take this IntelliTrace file back to Visual Studio Ultimate. I can open up this file and I can see exactly what was taking place. I can see all of my web requests that were made during that session. I can see all of the exceptions that were thrown and caught. I can take one of these exceptions, I can open it up, and it's going to open up Visual Studio in a debug mode. But remember, this is not connected to the production environment. This is running on my local machine using debugging information that came from that IntelliTrace file. That IntelliTrace file is showing me the exact line of code that was running in production when that exception was thrown. We can also see here exactly what the state of all of the variables were. So here you can see this is a null reference exception, and that's the value that's being null. It might be interesting to now go back in time and see exactly why this value is null. Maybe it's because we couldn't access a database where we expected to get the value from. If you look up above, you'll notice every time an exception is thrown or caught, we can even mouse over an ADO.NET call, and you can see exactly what SQL statement or ADO.NET call was being made. This is extremely helpful for understanding exactly what went wrong in production so that I can fix the issue and get a bug fix out to the production environment right away. Now, this is just one way of collecting the IntelliTrace information. Later this year, the System Center team is shipping System Center 2012 Service Pack 1. So if you use System Center to monitor your applications in production, you can start to automatically capture this information anytime there's a problem. And I mentioned earlier, you can then take those problems from System Center Operations Manager, and you can file a bug directly to Team Foundation Server. And that way, as a developer, you see everything that System Center already knows about the problem, and you don't have to call the operations team to ask them for more information. You hopefully have everything you need to fix that problem. Now, I would like to show you just a quick video of one of my favorite customers, Columbia Sportswear. Columbia Sportswear has been using Visual Studio 2012 and Team Foundation Server 2012 for almost a year now. They started using it back in the beta timeframe, and I really like what they have to say about some of the benefits that they've realized from using that.
Columbia as a company is exactly what you see in the brand. We are Montrail, Mountain Hardware, the Columbia brand, Sorel. We are not just a product company, we're a lifestyle. As a development organization, we've had to adapt. And the way we've done that is in our approach to development. We've kind of combined waterfall with agile and scrum to show results faster. And that's really made a huge difference in expectation setting and time to market.
One of the difficulties is in the past it's always been IT in the business, and we're not partners. TFS 2012 has been a big help to Columbia in bridging that gap.
It's really allowed us to make sure we're on the right track every couple of weeks. So, if you're a little bit off course at the end of 2 weeks, that's a very easy correction. If you're a long way off course after 6 to 12 months, that's a complete rework. It can cost you millions of dollars.
TFS has encouraged us to not consider us as a development team as being just developers. Testers are equal partners in this. Business analysts, equal partners. Project managers, they're part of my development team.
The key to that has been Visual Studio and Team Foundation Server. We're managing our backlog. We're managing our source code. The tools are common across teams. Has really enabled me to plug a person in from the Java team into the .NET team. There's no ramp-up time for the tools and how we operate.
I'd say advice for cross-platform teams, Java teams, is you can move to TFS. It's not that difficult.
My changing the way we build applications, moving into more services-based applications that are more performant, that will work anywhere. You know, the thin client approach, you know, being able to do it on a phone or a tablet has really enhanced the end user's experience for us.
The status reporting is just fantastic. I can just quickly see from a burn down list where are we at in the current sprint? How many issues do we have left? What's our workload right now? If somebody's on vacation for a couple days, I can put in their availability and I can see that right away.
Even after just a few months of using the TFS 2012, it's helped improve productivity at Columbia. It's probably saved us hundreds of hours of development time.
Don't think that just because you live in the Java world or something other than a Microsoft development technology that these tools won't help you, because they will.
So I think that's a really great example of just one of the thousands of customers that has already started to use Visual Studio 2012. I just want to quickly show you, a lot of people ask me, you know, what makes Team Foundation Server different from tools like Git or Subversion or Bugzilla? And really, Team Foundation Server was the very first tool that was built from the ground up to integrate source control, bug tracking, requirements, build, feedback, lab management, and so on and so on. And the reason we built all of these capabilities into one system is to enable you to start to make smart decisions about how you build your software. You can see that the reason a change was made to a C# file was to fix this particular bug. And you can understand that that bug fix is available in this build, and that build went out to your customer yesterday. And you can start to answer those questions that I mentioned earlier. Was this file code reviewed? Did we run unit tests? Did those unit tests pass? And so that's really the magic behind Team Foundation Server. We also, in the video, you heard that you can use Team Foundation Server with Java development. We have a tool called Team Explorer Everywhere that runs anywhere Java runs, on a Mac or on Linux. And so you can start building your applications on those platforms, and those developers can sit side by side with your .NET developers. So again, Visual Studio 2012, it's a tool that helps you build these modern applications. You'll see some great demonstrations from my colleagues later this afternoon. It's a tool that helps you manage the entire application lifecycle from an idea all the way to a running application in production. We also are not done. Of course, we're launching Visual Studio 2012 today, but we also recognize that you expect us to continuously improve Visual Studio, and you can't wait until the next release, which might be, 18 or 24 months from now, in order to get new features and new capabilities. And so by the end of this calendar year, you'll see us deliver Visual Studio 2012 Update 1. Update 1 will have a lot of great tools for SharePoint development. You'll be able to run load tests and performance tests of SharePoint sites. You can write coded UI tests that can help you automate tests across those systems. We also are delivering new Agile tools, such as the ability for you to work with Kanban. Kanban is a popular technique for making sure you measure a continuous flow of value across your development and your testing and your deployment and all the different methods of your application's lifecycle, so that you don't have too much or too little within any part of that process. And so that's a tool that will fit right within Team Foundation Server 2012 later this calendar year. You can get started today if you are an MSDN subscriber, you can download Visual Studio 2012. If you are not an MSDN subscriber, you can download a free trial that works for 90 days of Visual Studio 2012, so you can try it out. Of course, we have Express products that are available for free as well that you can check out. Another new thing that we did in this release that can help you to try Visual Studio 2012 is that if you open a solution or a project in Visual Studio 2012 and you make some changes and you save those, you can still open that same solution using Visual Studio 2010 Service Pack 1. So that allows you to have a few people on your development team using 2012, while the rest of the team might still be on 2010. You can also use Visual Studio 2012 to continue to build for older versions of the .NET framework. And so really, there's no reason not to try it out. I still don't know how to turn off this timer. Another thing that you may have seen us do is make Team Foundation Server available as a cloud service on the Windows Azure platform. And so you, of course, can continue to host Team Foundation Server on premises yourself and customize it and make it your own and maintain it. But you can also visit tfspreview.com and you can sign up for an account within seconds. So it's in preview mode right now, which is kind of like a beta. You can use it for real applications. I have hundreds of customers around the world that I work with that are using it for everyday production development of applications. And then in the future, once we move from a preview to a final release, you'll have the option to start paying for the service or to migrate your data somewhere else, such as Team Foundation Server running on premises. But we're really excited about the service. It gets updated about once every 3 weeks with new features and bug fixes and new capabilities that you can try out. And so it's really a fantastic way to start using Team Foundation Server if you're not already. Finally, I want to say thank you. Thank you very much for coming today. Thank you for having me here in South Korea. It's very exciting to be here. And I want to say thank you to all of our partners around the world who build on top of Visual Studio and integrate new solutions to help you be better developers and better testers and better architects. And I'm pleased to say that thanks to all of you that have downloaded Visual Studio 2012 already, this is the fastest downloaded release of Visual Studio ever. I think this number is about 2 weeks old. I've heard it's somewhere around 750,000 now, so it just continues to go higher and higher. And we could not do it without your help. And so thank you very much for being here. Thank you to my hosts here in South Korea for having me. It's an honor to be here. And I think that about concludes our session. So thank you very much.